Welcome everybody. This is the Community and Economic Development Committee. I'm John Welleton.
Felix Rivera.
Ryan Yale, Planning Department.
Andy Honest, Clerk's Office.
Forrest Dunbar.
Christopher Constant.
Go around, Chris.
Sure. Chris Judy, Economic Development.
What's Cruz Treasury?
Ryan Stewart, Municipal Attorney's Office.
Debbie Roll, Clerk's Office.
Jeff Hickman, Health Department.
Jed Smith, AMCO.
Bill Schneider, California Company.
Kerry Gurigan, Alaska Marijuana Industry Association.
Kim Cole, Raspberry Roots.
Cal Dean, DAW Council.
Kate Parrish, representing Brown Jug.
Adam Longfield, Brian Rashid, The Alchemist.
And Sharon, you have a quorum.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I forgot that. Okay, so Dean is not here yet, and he's fairly important for items A and B. So I'd like to do C first. Do we need to wait? Is that okay? We've got people waiting.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Tim Potter to get here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we won't do that. We want to start a discussion on this house.
So,
But can you sit? You want to sit over here? We have reserved 2 seats for you.
Discounts make sense because it seems like there's a lot of people here for it. Let me down.
Did you get the reply Dean wrote to your email?
I did.
No one else has this one. Did somebody make copies? So Dean sent this to Treasury and I guess the two of you, right? And we got an email yesterday that talked about some edits to this. Because ultimately, and this has to work for the industry, has to understand what it is, and Treasury has to know what the heck we're talking about. So we don't want to take something that's a few words that are confusing and turn it into 2 pages that are confusing.
What email did you receive?
It was making copies. It was from last night. I don't know, I guess 12. Something for everyone. We're voting for Eugene.
12th man.
So on the discounts we had, at our previous meeting, we had a version that had 2 different ways of looking at it. And had a discussion, and Dean had his PowerPoint, which we all have. And we decided to point him in the direction of option 1. Is that right? And that has led to this, that you have in front of you. And that was sent to us yesterday, the day before, and then went to Treasury, and Treasury had some ideas on how to streamline it. And that's what's in that email. So if we get it quick, maybe we can wait, unless you want to talk broadly about the whole issue, or
Whatever you'd like to do.
might be easier. We could go down your, let's wait for that email just for a minute. I think it was well done. You know, they had some great comments, I guess, and then Dean had some recommendations on it. Anyway, so does anyone, having read this, have any ideas? Correct?
I want to see the comments.
I guess, you know, a point in that, so we can start this discussion. Welcome.
Sorry, I'm late.
I was late once myself.
My Uber driver's late. She didn't work for money, so I have to be nice to her. She's had a driver's license since 16. I got her 4, so I just got her away. She ran over me last.
For the record, Assemblyman Training has joined us, and Assembly Council Dean Gates.
Sorry I'm late. I don't have the same excuse.
I thought you drove him. So just to catch Dean and Dick up, we are on the discussion of the definition of discounts for the sales price. And we got, Dean had sent an email, he sent this to Treasury, and they came back with some comments, and we're making copies of that email. So we'll have it in front of us. But one thing that was left open on that is, where do employee discounts go? What we have here, employee discounts are taxed, essentially. And I think comments from Treasury were, well, they're trying to special group like you got a senior discount or something like that. And it really is kind of a policy cost.
The tax division is saying it's okay to allow those discounts to be untaxed.
I think it was highlighted as an issue.
So, because I thought that was some reason that this came forward, that people were concerned that their employees were getting a benefit. But I would suggest that it seems reasonable to allow the people that work there that discount. But
To what level though? I mean, they can buy $100, they can buy $1,000. What level, Chris? There should be some level put in there. Sorry, John.
you know, it's an interesting part of the question. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So I think I disagree with you, Dick, in that, you know, I was worried about the Costco model where people could avoid the tax by paying a large upfront fee and then getting a significant discount in that way. With employees, an employee is a certain kind of thing. You're not an independent contractor. You have to pay the workman's comp. You know, there are legal things that make you an employee, and it's a relatively set number of people. I don't think it's a wise business plan, but I mean, if an employer, a marijuana shop or cultivator or whatever, wanted to provide a significant reduction or a significant amount of marijuana product to their employees, I think it's a small enough number of people that I don't think it would make us create a huge loophole. I think it would be really bad business practice, you know, according to Notorious B.I.G. But anyway,
It's pretty typical to give an employee discounts.
Yes.
But I don't think only retail can sell it, people. Cultivation can only sell it.
Right.
So this is only talking retail.
right, okay.
Yeah,
John, how do you define employee?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It is legally defined.
I know, but you'd have to define what employee is. Full-time, part-time, adjunct employee?
Well,
Because people will scoot around their tax no matter what you have to do.
They all have to have their car.
yeah, in retail, they all have a TAMS card. I think they're not the equivalent, right?
But we need to build something, we can do that, we can build something like that in there. So you can define an employee, because otherwise,
I think it's
you're gonna see
defined
people
out.
playing all sorts of games.
If I might, I don't think you have contractors working as employees in this field. It's too regulated.
We have some good dealers, we have some not so good dealers.
I understand.
Like
but
names?
Yeah, I get it. If you have an operation and someone who's not officially signed in and part of your legal process, you're shut down. You know, or you're at least penalized greatly if they find out.
Felix, any thoughts?
So if there is a definition of employee that will suffice Dick's concern, I don't see any reason why we can't just reference it in here.
So employee discount would be before or after the tax? Like you delete the idea is you give them their 20% discount and then tax that amount, or do you tax the full amount and then give them their discount? And that's where we're jostling around in here. Let's go down, because you'll like this a little bit on this. So we have, did they copy up the color? Okay, good. Okay, so you've got an email that Treasury sent and had some good information in response to Dean sending this. So, do you want to go through this then?
Sure. Yeah. we can do
So just email, you can start it.
that. Okay. So I think I was gonna probably have Ryan do some of this too, since we worked on it together yesterday.
Does people in the audience know what we're talking about here? Trying, okay. But you know what it's like, we had a question, okay, what is the sales? What discounts are allowed before the tax on marijuana? So we're trying to define that. We had just a few words that were crisply defined and were confusing in the industry. So now we've expanded the number of words substantially. We want to make sure we don't make it more confusing. But one thing is, one example was, where do employee discounts go? Do you know, if it's a $50 item, do you tax that $50 then give them their employee discount? So the full amount is taxed? Or do you give them their discount and the discounted amount is the sales tax? And that's for a number of items is the issue that we're looking at. And employee discount is particularly, which way would we go on that?
Is it a, I guess my question is that a huge amount of concern? Is that money enough to, that you're worried about that percentage of the money after the employee discount is received? Is that decrease that total amount substantially, that it cuts into the revenue that is generated by the taxation on marijuana? If you get a 10% discount on $5 worth of, pre-rolls, then, you're talking about 50 cents.
Yeah.
And then that percentage of the tax that's applied to that, is that difference so big? I wonder, I'm just trying to figure out what that meant.
Yeah, we haven't really got into that detail. I think we're just, where do you draw the line?
Okay.
We haven't talked about, I don't think we know that dollar amount. Probably don't have a way to know.
We'll have a chance to.
I think I wanted to say this is a policy decision, really. And after the email last night that you have here, I made some edits to our ordinance, and I made some comments showing those changes that I would make following Treasury's advice. So if you want, I can pass this on more.
Okay, this copy shows the changes in response to the email.
Yeah, exactly. And I tracked these changes in sort of light gray.
Okay, that should be easier then. So you can talk.
I think that after Treasury's comments and the changes I made, this is really much more simplified. That you can take these into consideration rather than the email comments and then these suggested changes in this handout. I'm sorry. You could, I think, in addition to these comments on the email, you get these suggested changes I made in this document.
I like that. Well, that he deletes that whole giant paragraph there that I was kind of banging my head against. The most recent version you just gave us.
Do we have enough for audience now?
It should be, yeah.
Okay, so we had a couple versions. We had a version that was sent out previously that was Dean's original version after our previous meeting. Now we have one that shows changes based on what Treasury sent. Treasury sent an email to Dean and he made changes based on that. So that's the one we'll be working from. Can I work from this one then?
Yeah, we do need some more copies of it though, I think, both for the public and for. Did you all get a copy of it?
Yeah, we got the email, yeah. The one that just got printed up. I got that, plus I got the one Ryan just sent.
Okay, great.
Do we have enough?
No, that's something else actually.
Oh, yes, okay, yes, that's it.
I'm sorry, I made 12. Would you like some more?
Okay, so Dean, would you can we have Dean walk us through this then? Feel free to chime.
Sure. Sure. So, the first change I made was on page 1, line 26. Instead of when, I changed to prior to, not where I was paragraph, regarding clarifying sales price sections that are not allowed to calculate on tax. So it just fits with where we go. So, one of the Treasury's really valuable comments is that instead of defining both discounts and special offer, just define special offer and what is allowed to reduce the price below tax, pre-tax. And don't need to then define discounts. So like first, Mr. Dunbar mentioned, page 2, 7 to 26, I've just deleted the whole definition of discounts. Desirable or not, I guess that's up to the body. And the next change down in the definition of special offer, I've made a few edits. One is instead of to use the word discount, instead of increases, I use price reduction, and the concept being, because the word discount is used in sales price, and sales price can be reduced by discounts, where instead of saying these are special offers, which are distinct. So throughout the definition of special offer, we use price reduction instead of discount. So there are clearly distinct categories, and you see that throughout that paragraph. And then on page 3, for the type of records that retail businesses are expected to retain, this just kind of gels with the changes in the definitions, so that the records you retain are just identification of any special offer applied to a taxable sale. So receipt needs to just itemize a price and a special offer of 20% off for the holiday or anniversary, and then the price and the tax and whatever other discounts you might have for a, a loyalty membership or whatever. It doesn't need to be indicated on the receipt. And so that's what that change is about. If I've got the point.
Mr. Bowden.
Yeah, Forrest?
That's
Thank
all.
you. I think I really like this. Because remember last meeting I got confused there momentarily because we were defining a discount that was going to be taxed or not taxed, and I got on the opposite side of this. But I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, is that discounts will be taxed, but special offers will not. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right, and so we have, I mean, this is kind of why people hate lawyers, but it's also why lawyers are useful. We've created this category called special offer. You put the
I agree.
yeah, you put the things that don't require consideration into there, and I think it makes it much more readable and much more understandable. And I'd like to hear from the industry if they agree. But I like this. I guess the only change I would ask for, and I'm not sure if it's somewhere else and I'm just not seeing it, is that employees be added here explicitly. So if you said, in recognition of a classification of purchases such as a senior citizen, or, I mean, somewhere in the special offer category, I think we should include the employee discount, unfortunately, and try to avoid the word discount. But if we're saying that is untaxed, then that should be spelled out in the special offer category.
I make a point though that as far as discounts, the key thing we were worried about are ones, like you were saying, where you pay to get it. So
Right.
it's really the only sales price, the only discussion of discounts is here, discounts provided based on other paid consideration. Right, is that the only place we talk about discounts?
Yeah, but the problem is that out in the world of ideas, they see the word discount, they're gonna still have that question. And so I think this has carefully been crafted to shift that, though it's like government speak, we're calling special offers not discounts. It works. So, but I think we do need to be clear, otherwise the industry is gonna question. I would like to hear from the industry. Maybe Janet could come up.
Well, we have special offer, we also have the phrase price reduction in here, right? So the employee price reduction.
Right.
Mhm.
That's fair.
So a senior citizen gets a price reduction, such as a senior citizen or employee.
Sure.
Okay, anything that?
Is there that much money involved with this that we have to change and allow this special category? Is that much money we're dealing with, you know?
I don't know if this is about money, it was just there was confusion on where to draw the line within the industry.
The other thing, keep in mind, if you're doing this, we have the alcohol tax coming up. Now, they're gonna be here demanding the same quality marijuana, so if you're doing this now with marijuana, you're gonna have alcohol coming in front of us too.
I think that's an interesting question. I wonder,
I'm
the
sorry,
alcohol
is that a
industry.
problem?
No, it's true, and it's something we might have to tackle. I do wonder if the alcohol industry provides employee discounts in the same way.
Who knows?
Brown Jug is here.
Oh, good.
We can ask that question.
Does the alcohol industry give employee discounts typically?
Yes, we do.
Okay, there you go.
Is that a discount, a special offer?
Employee special offer.
Look at one aspect, you've got to figure out the unintended consequences will be, because if that's passed, the alcohol industry is going to come in and demand the same treatment.
So are we gonna have to do a C on this?
What's that?
I don't think so.
Statement of economic impact?
No, I don't think
Let's wait until after the alcohol tax passes and then
No, but I'm talking about this.
I don't think so.
I think we will have to do a C on this.
Okay,
My
so
opinion.
Felix, any comments?
No.
Dean?
You know, for alcohol, the tax is, I mean, you're right, we would have to address that if it passes by voters. I think it's very distinct. And you should consider what's presently in place, which is just the state's tax. That's the employees go, since it's for sale.
Yeah, the wholesale tax.
But in this, here we have, I mean, this is, would these definitions apply to an alcohol tax where they are in our code?
Oh, no, we don't. right now, the ballot proposition that's going to the voters in April, it doesn't, it authorizes the assembly to enact exemptions and so forth. So nothing's there about now about employees or about every detail. And the assembly could later, like you do something similar if the assembly decides to.
Right?
I just wanted to just say that just from Treasury's perspective, and when Ryan and I were working on this yesterday, that really Treasury's interest is to focus on what affects the tax. And so that's why we were trying to simplify and not really spend a lot of time defining what comes after the tax, but to really focus on and clarify what impacts the tax. And so that's what the tax enforcement ordinance is for, and my auditors would focus on events that impact the tax basis. So that's why we tried to really separate out what constitutes a special offer, and that way when we get clear on that, those are the only things that retailers can apply to impact the actual tax basis and therefore the tax itself. If they then come up with the subtotal price or whatever you want to call it, and then they want to apply discounts after that for whatever business reasons they want to offer those, then that's up to them. That's a business decision, and it doesn't impact the tax, and it wouldn't be something that my auditors would then look for and enforce. And they're not going to say, oh, you didn't apply your post-tax discount properly, but we don't even look for that kind of thing. So if it's in the tax enforcement ordinance, it needs to be something that we're enforcing. And that's why we suggested to remove that discount section, because it goes into a lot of detail about things that we aren't really enforcing and looking for.
Good, that's helpful.
And just a very brief follow-on, some of the impacts I think would have an expected impact on revenue that's de minimis. But another interest here is maximum amount of clarity for the taxpayer and for Treasury in the event of an audit. So I think just having there's going to have to be a meeting of the minds there about what is or is not allowed, what documentation is required to support that, et cetera. So I think that's really the interest that we're pursuing.
So if your quick review here, if we were to add something like such as a senior citizen or employee, does that section there for special offer, is that clear guidance for you?
I think that the rest of the section made sense to us. We were a little bit concerned about the way that it was written, talking about classes, other classifications of purchasers who were offered discounts. And we were thinking that, well, that could just start to become unlimited. Who makes the decision on what class receives a special offer discount? And so I think if we're going to still have a classification of based on purchasers, that we should be probably a lot more specific and add more than just senior citizens. We had some suggestions, like if there's veterans or in-state residents or whatever these other classes would be, and try to keep it to a pretty narrow list. And that would hopefully prevent gaming by trying to come up with other classes, like it's someone wearing a certain kind of shoe day and that's the class. Or we were kind of being a little funny about it, but there's all these different classes of purchasers that Treasury would not want to be in the position of trying to pre-approve that this is a special class that's allowed, or that it fits in with the kindness of the description in the code. So if it is going to stay that way, we just think that it needs to be more specifically laid out as to what the classes are. And if whichever direction employee goes, it just needs to be either clear that it's in the class that's allowed, or clear that it's excluded from the special offers.
Okay, good, thanks. Thanks, Chris.
I don't know, when we think about how this actually works, the retailer is reducing the price that they're generating as a sale, right? And so they have an interest in not doing that. There's no game, I think, that you can play in the process if what you're doing effectively is dropping your personal net and the tax that's connected to it. We're not talking about maintaining their price and dropping the tax. We're not talking about maintaining the revenue at the high level and only paying so much in taxation. So to me, the idea that there's some loophole here that would allow for a game to be played, no matter how many classes they put in there, really, it kind of goes against logic, because they'll be killing their business. It goes back to Mr. Dunbar's point. There's a certain threshold at which it makes sense to do for certain people, but it doesn't make sense to do for other people. Other than those, we're going to discount this whole product line for everybody today, which is not a discount but a special offer. And so, you know, I think that you could list 30, 50 different classifications of people. If the offer wanted to allow that, it's fine because it doesn't harm. There isn't a game in which they're gathering less revenue and gathering equal revenue and paying less taxes. And so it allows for some
So
flexibility.
once we don't allow discount based on paid consideration, you can pull that game away.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say that, and I wanted to add that we've had discussions at this committee about what happened with Arctic Valley, for example. The ski, right, is it Arctic Valley? Yeah, Arctic Valley Ski, where, you know, they thought that they were in a classification, but they weren't specifically listed. And so the question is this an exclusive list or something like? We've had a couple of those examples. And I agree with Chris. So long as we can avoid the situation where people are paying something to get into that category, then I think sort of the market will handle it. And I appreciate that you want things to be very spelled out. But I think the history shows the problem is we can never think of them all, and then a perfectly logical category comes around and they've been excluded. And then we have to go through this whole process of either amending our ordinance and having a big fight about it. And it's better to I think leave it unstated.
Comments on in my business, we discount if you wear a costume some days. We got all kinds of crazy stuff, you know, and it's just fun and hopefully draws people in.
Right.
The one discount they can't do, because it was the first ordinance I ever passed, is based on military status, active military status.
There were two of us that did that for us.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
It was my
Just
first ordinance.
briefly, Mr. Constance, Mr. Dunbar's points are well taken, and I just wanted to point out, I thought that at a previous meeting there was a concern raised about the fact that there is no effective floor for discounting. And so in the event of, say, an audit where Treasury might be confronted with records of sales that had been discounted, say 99% on a pre-tax basis, and so the tax adjustment was also at a 99% level, as long as there was some explication that this was a classification-based discount on that day for individuals named John who showed up between the hours of 10 and 2 that day, that it seems unclear under this language that would be disallowed. And if that's the intent, you know, that's fine. But in terms of, again, achieving maximum clarity, I think considering that aspect is probably the appropriate time to do that.
The one thing that I do see where that happens, and I've questioned some operators of this, is they do reduce their price to $1 for an item. And that's pretty rare, like, I can't remember exactly why I have seen that, but I've seen it. Someone said if you win because you're the customer that comes in or something, it's $1. But still, in that case, they're gonna pay the tax on $1, they're not gaining profit on their purchase. And so it seems to be reasonable, and it's still a business decision for them. And I don't know that anyone who's invested $1 million in a retail operation is going to discount all their products to $1 so that they can go out of business. And so, because that's what would happen, that would be the net outcome.
Well,
Go ahead.
So you're in the retail game, John. I mean, when there's a general sales tax, and I guess you haven't had to deal with the sales tax here in Anchorage, but in your knowledge, you know, when someone does have a clearance sale, for example, a going out of business sale, things are marked down tremendously. Are they paying sales tax on the original price, or are they typically paying at the till, you know, sales tax on what they ring up?
That's what I would assume is what you bring up, but I set up in Palmer before and paid their 3%. That's what it's like. And I just paid on my growth. But I don't know what the law is. Maybe I broke the law. Dean?
I think relevant to things like clearance sales and so forth, the keywords in this paragraph, special offers, that the retailer receives no consideration. It's at line 42. And with clearance sale, clearly the retailer is just receiving no consideration for reducing the price without a doubt. I also suggest I recognize your concerns using terms like the classification of purchasers And if we just take out the phrase, starting from after the consideration in like 42, 43, and is offered in recognition of the classification of purchasers. So, I guess that creates that slippery slope you're talking about. If it just says no consideration such as senior citizen, anniversary, holiday, special offer, and similar special offers, it at least takes out the idea that you can create a classification. Instead is similar to, there's 3 examples of a special offer that are pre-tax, and whatever else Treasury in their review says, yes, that qualifies or doesn't qualify, we need to be audited. Maybe that would be a more workable language.
John, you define what senior citizen is in here?
That's a question. Is there a clear definition somewhere on senior citizens?
Off the top of my head, I don't think so.
But I think it doesn't matter. I think what we're doing by saying classes such as A, B, and C, including what could be D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, is we're eliminating the need to be descriptive, but allowing the retailer to define it according to the terms that they establish. And I think that is common business and sensible to let the business operate their business how they would.
And we're government, you need to define for the people exactly what you mean by senior citizen. Over 55, over 65, over 75, over 30? You need to
Okay, so
define
let's take
what
senior citizen out.
is.
And just leave it in a general way, so that again, if an operator wants to include senior citizens or, people from 25 to 35 or.
So, Dick, I think the point we're trying to make is we would have to define senior citizen if it impacted our program. If we were saying you got this tax benefit because you're a senior citizen. But what we're actually saying is that the industry can do whatever they want, and they can create any of these categories they want, so long as they're not being paid for it. Senior citizen to them could mean anything. It doesn't really matter because, as Chris said, the money's coming out of their pocket, actually. And then 5% of when it came out of their pocket is coming out of our pocket. And that is a relatively small number, unless they want to have a massive write-down of their inventory, which I think is sort of silly business practice.
Well, you're an attorney, I appreciate that, but you live in specificity. The law is specificity, and I would rather define what it is for our purposes.
And it's
That's
not
just me.
coming out of our pocket, though. It never existed. This is one of those things where until it's been collected, it doesn't exist. And so while some might say that's a net negative impact on our tax revenue, that's one of these things where it doesn't exist. We're not losing. We haven't gained it yet.
We had a question here. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
John Radden with Great North Campus. I was just going to offer as a living concept. We was talking about the $1 gram. You can't give product away, so if there's like a contest or something, sometimes the winner of the contest, in consideration for winning and receiving the discounted product, would pay a de minimis amount. So that we're not giving it away.
I just wanted to say that I do think that it's important to be specific as we can, and what we're saying can be adjusted off of the tax basis. And the reason for that is, even though it could be small amounts, this particular tax is a fiduciary tax. So the retailers are not actually taking the money out of their business account and paying it to the city. It's paid by the consumer. And any time that during an audit we have a fiduciary tax and we have to disallow a non-tax transaction, that means we then assess the tax and it's due as of the date that it should have been paid. And when that happens, it triggers penalties and interest that are pretty steep. I mean, depending, it's a percentage of the dollar amount of tax that we assess that has not been paid. So if we have situations that, if we leave it to non-specific and there's all of these non-tax transactions, and during an audit we say, well, that's not actually allowed by the code, a couple of things will happen. One is we then will reassess the tax, we'll reassess the penalties and interest, and it then becomes a business expense of the retailer because that transaction has already happened and they didn't collect the tax from the consumer. The other thing that would probably happen is that the taxpayer would probably appeal. And they would say, well, we don't agree with that, and then we end up in front of the hearing officer arguing about the particular provision of the code that isn't specific enough and whose interpretation is right, and that takes a lot of time to do that. And then we usually end up with a code revision. So like Ryan was saying before, this is the time to try to contemplate that and make it as specific as we can.
Thank you.
And I would offer that the opposite is true, that we want it as flexible as possible. And the fact is that there's no such thing as a non-tax transaction, because whenever the transaction happens, we just heard testimony, it can't be given away for free. And so there will be taxes on every one of these transactions. And what I'm hearing you say then is that we actually have to put in the code coming costume discount. And we have to put in code it's Sunday 3.14 of March 14th, so that has to be in the code, right? And that doesn't make sense.
Or you can put that in.
Yeah, no, but what they're arguing is it needs to be specific, and my point is we need to be flexible. We just need to be cognizant that they still must pay taxes on any of the transactions that come across the table, and that we would allow them in their business to do that. And so I think that there is no such thing as a non-tax transaction that would come because of this part of the code, because if there is, then you do have a reason to investigate them. You know?
So I think I agree with Chris, because I think in our prior experience, we never have been able to have the imagination to create all the categories we need. And it's like the longer you make that list and the more specific you make that list, I think it actually increases the likelihood that somewhere down the line you're going to have a category that falls outside of it and then leads to a conflict, because naturally regulators see the long list and say, well, if it's not in this list, then it must be forbidden, which is actually the opposite of what we want to do. So I think given the nature of this industry. Now, I appreciate what you're saying, and I think that you probably will have some conflicts, and you'll probably have some appeals. But I think that'll happen regardless of whether we make it specific or flexible. And again, our lived experience is that a bowling alley wasn't in the list, so now we have to fight about a bowling alley.
And then define what a playfield is.
Right.
At any point, they get to decide what they sell something for. So you could say one shop may be selling something for $15, and one over here selling it for $10, and that's their selling price, and you base your tax on that. So, what you're doing when you do a discount is you're just kind of price discrimination. Some people totally willing to pay the $15, but I don't want to squeeze the 10 out of this other group, so you give a little discount. They could make it all 10, and you would be in the same place.
Sure.
So if we just leave it broad, all they have to do is say, it's a special discount for that day. And it's pretty common. We can get some comments from each of it. When I do at my store, we do have a code because you want to track what we're doing, and so you do your line item, then you have a discount for whatever that event is, and it deducts it, and that way I can track that everything's going right. Is that, maybe from the retailers here, what kind of discounts have you given, and how do you record it?
Kind of special offers.
Yeah, so if you go into Lead Maps, you'll see that every single retail offers some sort of a sale every single day. So you can't possibly qualify I promise you. And then, at my store we have a vet discount, we've got teacher and student discount. And we have, an industry discount.
There's lots of days too. Like I know, Will, you do like a lot of discounts, like 50
I don't want to oversimplify this, but for example, if we sell a gram of a concentrate for $100 on Monday, then Tuesday we have $50 grams of concentrate. In essence, if you want to pay tax on a $100 concentrate from Monday, we're doubling our tax rate from 10%, from 5% on Monday to 10% on Tuesday. So we're choosing to take in less revenue. So I'd assume that would be the price that would be taxed on, not a price that we're not collecting revenue on, because that just increased our tax rate. For us, we have deals multiple days a week. Like we're having a halfway to 420 special on Sunday. So it's just all promotion. And so we're gonna have special ounce prices that day, or we're gonna have special pre-roll prices that day, and that's at a loss to our business. But we're choosing to do that to promote a product, not to increase our tax liability. And so, from our perspective, we would think that would be taxed on what we're actually bringing in terms of revenue, not in terms of a product that we choose. Because what happens when we just say, okay, well, tomorrow's not our $50 gram special. Tomorrow we're just changing the price to $50 grams. It's like, is it then not a special? We're not trying to work around paying taxes. We're trying to, not pay a higher tax rate on our revenue.
And then one other thing I'd really like to put out there for you guys that I'm sure hasn't even occurred to you is our POS systems don't have the capacity to say, all right, well, this particular whatever it's gonna charge this, but we're gonna go ahead and increase and we should pay a tax on this. I mean, asking POS systems to differentiate like that, it would be very, very challenging.
Chris?
So I think that what you said really gets to the point that the point isn't to reduce tax liability when they all make these offers. But I think the ordinance is responding to a set of conditions in which it's conceivable that someone gets paid and a tax reduction happens, but all the money gets transferred to the retailer through any number of vehicles, which was the paid membership, you get a certain amount, or a discount offered from a grower that gets transferred to the sale, so you see the revenue, but you don't pay the tax on it. And so that's the real problem I think we're trying to address here, and clarify for people that they can in fact offer discounts, or not discounts, special offers for their business. And so I want us to be really clear about that, because there is the potential, but I think most operators and all operators that I have seen so far, when they talk about providing a special offer, it's not to reduce their tax liability. That's just a kind of a common sense effect. It's a common sense effect of the sale.
Just a couple of general comments. The comments I heard from the industry representatives, I don't believe that any of what they just explained in terms of the sales that you're running would be incompatible with the structure that's being contemplated on this or any of the other versions under consideration. If the retailer wants to reduce its income on a product and the knock-on effect that would have on the sales tax calculation, that's just how a sales tax works. Mr. Constant's point, yes, trying to make sure that we separate out paid-for consideration that essentially would move revenue outside of that taxable transaction is sort of the real harm, I think, to be avoided. And then I think the other interest here is really just what we're talking about here is clarity, right? Okay. So if you look at section B1 of the latest proposed revision here, documentation would be expected to support the application of any special offer. So again, I think in some of the more exotic special offer situations, the type of supporting evidence you would have that someone was rightfully entitled to the special offer you were running might become a little bit thorny the way that it sounds like we're headed here. For example, if you're running a discount for, are we going to collect student identification cards for application of a student special offer? And if not, then how does one effectively audit that type of a sales record without that type of documentation? So I think there are some audit-specific concerns that are not really to do with the amount of revenue being captured or not. They really just have to do with creating or avoiding pitfalls in the system here and in the audit trail.
So wouldn't having clear definitions suffice? Our tax collectors aren't in the business of verifying that a retail alcohol operation collected IDs for people just to buy or employee discounts or anywhere else. That's not really the standard. But wouldn't it be reasonable to require the retailer to come up with for each discount that they offer, kind of a policy, if you will? This is the definition of this discount and why. On this day, we do this, and they keep a record of that. If nothing else, we've been good at forcing retailers to keep good records, and if they don't, that's where they get in trouble. And so define what is the discount on this day, what is a 420 discount, it means this on this day. So then you can at least verify, or if it's for employees, employee discount means this. If it's for regular customers, regular customer means this. So you can have at least some record of what that means instead of trying to get down to the individual, did they have collections on 7/10 from this transaction? Are we at that level with any other industry? Do we do that with any other industry?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of just the way that we deal with our other taxes. It's a little bit different because, for instance, with room tax, that's another fiduciary tax. Well, we aren't, the price is the price. So the price of the room is the price, and that's what the tax is applied to. And so when we do our audits, we're very focused on non-taxable transactions, because those are the ones where, you know, there could be some gaming of the system or some sort of misapplied tax or misapplied non-taxable event. And so we expect to see, for instance, if it's a direct paid government transaction, we expect to see copies of certain documentation, a copy of the credit card, or you know, those types of things. If it's a medical stay, we expect to see a copy of the Medicare check or the order from the government saying that they can stay there. So even in that situation, if they have a policy, that's not sufficient, because their policy could be, we don't charge tax on Medicare stays, but we have to have something to justify that, oh, okay, well, you called this a Medicare stay under your policy, but where is the proof that it was a Medicare stay? So I'm not sure that that's really helpful in what you're talking about now, but it's hard to contemplate other scenarios. It's the only one I can really think of right now.
Thank you, Dean.
How about the motor vehicle rental tax? Do you have some issues with that as well?
We do. So, excuse me, we don't have a lot of non-taxable transactions in motor vehicles that I can think of, or the rental vehicles, but what we do have would be, we have a cap on the rental vehicle tax itself. So that's a scenario where we have to validate that the rental vehicle agency actually taxed up to that cap. And so we have to make sure that, you know, the contract says a certain thing and that the dates match. And so there's different audit points depending on what it is that we're auditing. So, and we haven't been able to do a lot of audits for marijuana just yet, and the industry's very new. So these are really good questions to think about, and I understand what you're saying, that the price is the price. I mean, if the price is going to be this, then that is what it's going to be. And I think there's two scenarios. One, if we get the data from the point of sale system and the price is the price and the tax is the tax, it's pretty straightforward. But what we're talking about is when the price is the price, and then there's a percentage discount, and then there's a new price. And then the tax is applied to that new price. And that's where we're focusing on with the special offer definition. And as long as whatever we come up with is clear, and the documentation would be clear to back that up, and it's simple and it's easy to do. We just don't want to create a scenario where we're assessing tax on retailers that they didn't collect from their customers. That's not the purpose.
Right.
That's not the point.
You know, I think most of us agree on that. So,
Well, you know, our main point here was if they pay for a club card, we don't get that. It seems like we should have a tax that, so we're trying to get around that.
and clear.
So you really, I mean, that's our main issue here, and all this other stuff is kind of add-on. So your challenge would be, we got rid of all this, your price is your price. We don't even talk about that. Let them have the prices. But they can discount, so they can discount. But we just want, is that discount based on a paid consideration?
Right.
There's your challenge auditing,
Right.
is did they
Right.
pay for it? So it's almost, we should back up from the special offer business and just say it can't be based on paid consideration. And somehow you have to figure out how to audit it. It's not right. That's really what our main concerns are. And I think from the industry as well. So
Yeah, just before Jenna, on the point of the car rental tax versus the room tax, you know, I don't know how it works in the hotels, but I rent a car all the time, and I get a discount all the time, and I'm not taxed on the full rate of that car. I'm only taxed on the discounted rate.
Right.
And so we have two paradigms then under your, what did you call it, kind of a tax, a
Fiduciary tax. Right.
One, the hotel, where it's based on the cost of the room, it doesn't matter up or down, but on the other one, it's, I get discounts and I don't get taxed on the other amount.
I think we're talking about the same thing, though. I mean, if a room is going for $150 and there's some sort of discount because you're a AAA member or whatever they do, they're validating that according to the rules, and then they're saying, okay, now your new room rate is $100 instead of being $150, and that's the amount that the tax is applied to. So I think it's the same. You're saying the same thing.
But effectively, the rule we're talking about here, if we don't move into the paradigm John's talking about, scrap the whole thing and just say paid consideration is taxable, otherwise not, is that they could set up the parameters for that discount however they want. It's a business decision. Let them do that. And then that eliminates the need for a rigorous audit trail. All you need to know is that they had a reason for doing this and that they collected the tax on revenue that they had, as opposed to coming up with mechanical systems that set traps for you and for other people along the way. So,
Jan?
just wanted to get back to Ryan's comments about the industry's concerns. We understand all those examples were to give you an idea that you can't list every specific tax, or discounted price reduction event. And then to get back to, I think Revenue made a good point with the price is the price. The price is the price. So it should just be what the price actually paid is, and that's where the tax is applied. I don't think you're going to get into this issue where, if you have $50 gram concentrate Wednesdays, you're going to see a lot of sales for $50 a gram. It's not like you're going to see one sale and then everything else is going to be a different price because it's set across the board, and that's easy to pick out. And we can't hold records like student IDs because that's against the initiative. The language of the initiative is just real fast. So I like the way, either the way that Mr. Welton was going with, you can, the taxes apply after any discount unless the discount was in exchange for some consideration, or the new revenue input version that I don't think the audience has at all, just me, with the red lines. That one is pretty simple too.
Special offer version.
And then it might also make you guys feel better that there are no retails that I know of who have a pay-to-play kind of a system. And honestly, I don't think any customer would do that because we don't have the ability to be a Costco. We don't have the massive amounts of product to be able to give those kinds of massive discounts. And all of us are going to keep each other in check because Great Northern might have an amazing deal on Shatter on Saturday, and then you've got Sunday as $200 ounces, and I've got Monday as $25 vapes. People aren't going to commit to one, they're not going to commit monetarily to one store in order to pay $500 in order to get amazing discounts from that one store all year long, because we all offer amazing discounts on various things on different days of the week at different times.
The whole point of all these promotions is to get more customers in the door, which increases overall revenue. We wouldn't do this if it didn't make business sense, because we're not. We're a group of people that push through legislation that makes something legal. We're not dumb. We know how to push up revenue. We know how to do good business practices, and that's all we're doing.
Thank you.
Costco.
Sunny, you
Mr. Dunbar has an idea for a business, Costco.
Call it like Flynn and go ahead.
Yeah.
All right, where are we going?
So,
it's almost 10. We got 2 other issues.
I like this version.
I like this version, but I also like what you recommended to simplify it even further, down to like 4 lines, pay consideration, otherwise it's up to the retailer.
Well, so if we were to simplify more, tell me if this traumatizes. You're the one who will have to deal with this in the industry. What if we just got rid of this whole special offer section, and it simply says sales price, consideration, after reduction for special offer, okay? I guess we define special offer, maybe, but without deduction for the cost of property sold, et cetera, and so on, or discounts provided based on other paid consideration.
Yeah.
So how do you audit that? Well, you could watch the industry and see if someone's doing that. They'll say, "Buy our club card." Now you're going to watch that one and say, "All right, where are you going?" And that would be, they wouldn't do it unless it's fairly overt, right? It wouldn't be the point. So.
Yeah, we really like the sales price definition, the way that it's written, and I think just maybe making a little bit of changes to the special offer definition as a tier in this newest version that Dean just provided would probably make everything okay.
But I think what we're looking at here on the special offer is anything goes. So not making, our being specific is whatever they want to do.
So we would delete that whole paragraph. The only change, the ordinance would basically only be that sales price language, right? I mean, is there any other new
Special
language?
offer would mean a temporary reduction in sales price of marijuana, period.
And with that, so what happens with a point discount? That's not for a paid consideration.
Right, and that's a price reduction that's a temporary price reduction.
Right. But if you were to delete that whole paragraph, the sales price on its own, it says after reduction by any special offer, leave special offer undefined, and it's anything that doesn't require consideration. Isn't that what you were driving at, John?
My sense is you could get rid of this whole special offer section.
Right, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
probably good.
Right.
Does that work, Ryan?
I would just point out that special offer is specifically used in the
Right.
definition above under sales price. So it seems to me there might be an opportunity to just maybe simplify the proposed language of special offer more in line with the conversation here. I think Dean had already proposed deleting the "and is offered in recognition of a classification of purchasers" clause to streamline, and maybe there's other opportunities to do some further streamlining.
Would it work, just a special offer means a temporary reduction in sales price of marijuana, period?
Well, an employee discount is not a temporary reduction in sales price.
So answer that question.
Well, then it would be a reduction in sales price of marijuana, not based on considerations.
Right, which is funny because that's just restating what you say of the sales price.
So I think we're done. Let's have
Tautology.
Dean to play around with what he heard today and figure out a way to streamline the special offer section. And then I think we're done. We're going to be able to vote on this soon.
Sure.
Whether you like it.
That's all right. I can be a no vote.
Well, I think after we do that, the time
Get in after I leave, okay?
time here is precious. I think after you do that, let's introduce the ordinance and then have a work session on it, or just have a floor debate on it. Let's stop tying up this.
Yeah, we gotta take that for you. We spent our hours. Dean, do you have enough guidance?
I think so. When I came up with Treasury and I guess the sponsor right now, it's just
I would be happy.
and admin with sponsors.
So I think
And
responsible
then circulate flows for, I guess, introduction of the April 2016.
I think, yeah. that would be good. Yep.
Dean, would you look and see if we're required to have an SAE along with this? Look at the code and see if it requires an SAE to do this. I don't need it now, just take a look at it. Because I'll ask you on the
It
floor.
would, and I think that some economic effects can Treasury when some estimates if they're identifiable as.
I would really appreciate to understand the underpinnings of that number, not just a number, because I think that it's a wag. So
Yes, okay. Let's, okay, we got half an hour, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is more on mobile food units. I think we're pretty close to getting this out there. We have we have looked at this a couple times now, and there should be in front of you did we get the one with changes here? Oh, no, I guess you do. You have the changes. At our last meeting, we recommended some changes. Dean did it. We were gonna review the changes, and it's for introduction already.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is actually for introduction to 29, it's not a drafted one.
Right, okay, so I don't call it draft. This is to be introduced, but we wanted to look at the wording at any rate. Do we want to do that or just deal with it after Tuesday?
mine's not in color, but
Which one was that?
I have the track changes version, but the one you have shows, it just highlights what was changed. We have a number.
Yes, you do. I can tell you one second.
Mr. Chairman. So I realized that since the last meeting, January 24th, we made a bunch of changes. And while you have a color printout, I made copies of a grayscale printout showing changes from what we saw on January 24th in this county and what's been submitted. So we can pass those out.
Mr. Chairman, it's AO 2019-27.
I think it's 27. So the changes are shown in light gray, and anything unchanged is just simply black. Then you see in the left margin, it will show a little line next to the lines that have some sort of change since the last draft. If you like, I could go through that really quick.
Do you want to do that? Okay, we do it in just a few minutes. I mean, this is introduced, so we're
Yeah.
going to see it
So,
Tuesday.
the first main change you see in the title of movable is changed to repurposed intermodal shipping. And we're doing that for consistency throughout. Instead of using a movable container, we're using the full phrase intermodal shipping container. And the idea is to use a term that will be consistent throughout 2016, 23, and perhaps later 2021. And so on page 1, we've used that change in line 28. And then on page 2, we deleted the definition for a person-based shipping container. And then lines 25 to 41 on page 2, these changes are simply to identify a shipping container is exempt. It's a separate sort of category. So there's a vehicle or trailer, and then you've got a shipping container. It doesn't have to be a vehicle or trailer. But anything else that's used as a mobile food unit, it's got to be a vehicle or trailer. So the shipping container is exempt from the licensing in the state of Alaska requirement. So that's the basic thrust of that change into 30B, page 3. We worked with the Anchorage Health Department, Mr. Hickman, on some changes about the holding tanks, and that's just reflected in the changes on page 3, line 21 to 25. The bottom of page 3, it was a deletion of paragraph 5 because it's sort of redundant to what was done on page 2. And then on page 4, the paragraph H at the top of page 4, lines 1 through 16. This is the Anchorage Health Department. Mr. Hickman suggested we sort of recognize grandfather rights of some units that have been allowed to operate but they're not really in complete compliance with code. And we have this change that says a shipping container is okay, but I guess there's some units out there that have skis or something. And so this is change requested by the Anchorage Health Department. That paragraph 1 on line 7 was already in place about the width of the unit, and paragraph 2 is it's being added as new. And then Title 23 changes starting in section 3. We worked with the building official, Mr. Nuffsinger, and Fire Marshal for all of these changes that you see. And I don't think many of these are really shocking. They're mostly to clarify specific as to what will be recognized as exempt from a building permit, and what will specifically fit in, I guess, the technical requirements of I guess attached to utilities, attached to the utilities. And so I maybe not need to go into those specifically, but if anyone has questions, we've got Mr. Nuffsinger here this morning.
And do you want to sit up here just briefly? Ross?
Just one thing, right before we dive in, I love the title being the second phrase that can be lifted or dragged onto a vehicle or trailer for transport and have members of the public inside.
At the same time of being dragged.
There's a visual there that's really
Dragged members of the public
I'm
inside.
sure we'll have some objections from the health department.
I didn't read it that way.
Okay, so we can, Mr. Hickman, is this?
You want an amendment to the title, perhaps?
It does, yeah. We work with Dean and we're happy with the way it's revised, so.
Okay, good. Ross?
Yeah, we take no exception to what's being proposed.
Bam, I move that the committee support this ordinance.
Second.
Okay, any opposition? All right. Thank you, everyone. Whoa, Nelly, we got a comment for planning.
Not really, I
Title
just,
21 comes later.
I mean, everyone has this language in front of them, but some of the circles that I made to the draft were, it's talking about mobile food units. This new language that you're saying it could be 8 feet 6 inches wide and 48 feet long. These are Connex units with no bathrooms. They're talking porta potties outside, right? And the other thing I circled was
Where are we at?
I circled some of the utility connection stuff, but yeah, I just this use of permanent use of Connexes as opposed to what there really are, the temporary nature when we're talking mobile food unit. It is sort of mixing two worlds. it was just a sidebar comment I wanted to make. Thanks for hearing me.
And you know we have a Title 21 possibly changes coming forward.
Yeah.
You probably have to uncap.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. And so that'll deal with where they're allowed and so on. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on.
So, just last question on that. What you're suggesting then is these become accepted permanent uses on wherever they're allowed?
So right now, there's some limit on size, I think in Title 16 or 23 about the size of the mobile food unit. But what's proposed here that you guys will vote on is a change to allow them to be larger and allow them to take this different form. And I just wanted folks to take a moment to understand that we're talking about, 8 feet 6 inches wide and 48 feet long is now potentially be your mobile food unit.
That's been our standard for forever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all that's X'd out there is that it got moved from the definitions into the mobile section. So he's just relocating where that definition is.
Oh, so it's already allowed.
It's already in there, yeah, it's been in there. And in fact, this is better than the old code, because the old code said something about easily movable without special permits, which means you had to go find some federal code to figure out what size it was. So this just matches top of the 23. So I just took the language right out of 23 so that because we had a disparity in the way things were defined between the two codes. So we're trying to match them so we don't have problems between the two codes.
Well, then my comments moved or uninformed. Because it's underlined, it to me spoke to new language. Right.
Yeah, it's just, if you look up in the first page, it's removed from the first page.
I understand now.
Yeah, see up here, they exit out somewhere.
Oh, they just moved the same language.
Yeah,
Okay.
they just moved it to a different spot to make more sense.
My point.
Okay, so, thanks. Appreciate your time once again. Okay, so last on our list is discussion of area restrictions on packaged liquor stores, which we had discussed quite a bit in the previous meetings, and I'd have to say, I thought we had lost interest in, so I just let it sit, and it turns out I misinterpreted things, so we have it back, and we have, we're looking now, and I think Felix brought it up because In-N-Out Liquor is up for license, and that was one of the businesses we had kind of contemplated might have issues because we restricted the business quite close, and it seems unfair to allow this other one to sell whatever.
Correct.
So Felix, you want to speak on this?
I can briefly, and then thank you, Tim, for joining us at the
Tim,
table.
if you want to come up, anyone from the industry you want to sit up at the table. You don't have to.
You don't have to.
Well, if you speak, it's easier on the recording. So if you do speak loudly.
All right. So, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing this discussion have a second bite at the apple here. So, as you stated, In-N-Out liquor license is coming back to us on February 26th. And with mom and pops and the restrictions that we put on their license, there is a wish from the Midtown Community Council to see that extended to other licenses within their council and adjacent areas. And rather than targeting specific licenses and creating an economic disparity between licenses, we're trying to find some alternate solution. And so I really want to thank the Midtown Community Council for putting their collective minds to try to figure this out. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tim.
Tim Potter.
Okay, my collective mind. As the assembly heard when we discussed the mom and pops liquor store at 36 close to Arctic, the area, most of Midtown has a significant problem with street inebriates and associated issues of littering, vagrancy, a variety of things, including safety issues with inebriated folks stepping in the streets, getting hit by cars, all kinds of things. So when we, the community council, took on the mom and pops outlet, we did quite a bit of work trying to identify what are those things that you can do to try and figure out and interrupt what was going on. Since that time, Eddie at Mom and Pop's marks each shooter bottle and has no fortified beer out in singles that are a certain size and they have a specific minimum price. When evaluating it, to discuss the problem, for instance, if you stood at a corner and begged for money and got $5, you could effectively go buy at multiple locations 5 shooters, which are about 1.5 or 50 milliliters, 1.7 ounces. So you could effectively, for $4.95, get 7.5 ounces of hard liquor, which, looking at Department of Motor Vehicle standards for being inebriated or at least having difficulty, even a 200-plus man would be a problem at that point, and take several hours to have the liquor and the alcohol process through their body. So the other problem with shooters is that they're easily hid in pockets and distributed and or used. In the In-N-Out case, because Mom and Pops did associate a price, we came up with a minimum price. It's not necessarily the best way to do things, but under the current laws, the liquor licenses come up for review once every other year. And we have made a commitment to go to the assembly on every liquor license that's up for renewal for packaged liquor stores in Midtown. That seems to be our only tool right now, and it seems frustrating, and it creates a situation where Mom and Pops on one end is kind of the starting point, and they could be playing at an uneven field and disadvantage in the marketplace for about 2 years by the time we go through the whole cycle. So we had previously had the discussion about, do you do this citywide? What would the thing be? Is there just the Midtown Community Council? Does that address our problem for the council? I think you can see by that aerial photo, and there's probably 2 or 3 other packaged liquor stores that need to be identified on there that we're drooling, that there is a significant concentration, and I don't think you can argue that there's a significant concentration in Midtown, Spenard, and probably overlapping into North Star. And those are probably the 3 areas or community council boundaries that probably need to be isolated if it's not done across. Rogers Park might be another, and then over on Tudor Road doesn't seem to be the concentration, but I know there's been a lot of problems, and Dick can speak to some of those. So as we look at it, whether we attack it on a one-by-one basis or not, about $1 per ounce seems to be a tipping point on alcohol content. So that's why the shooters at Mom and Pop's were set at no less than $1.70. In-N-Out is continuing and has refused to voluntarily raise the price from 99 cents for the least expensive, and continues to sell. Personal observations, I have literally been in Mom and Pop's, observed multiple people either throw the beer back down because it's too expensive, or get to the counter and ask to get shooters. They get told what the price is, they get upset, they walk out, and they walk directly across 36th Avenue, never using the crosswalk, to In-N-Out, and buy shooters at that location and walk out. It's frustrating to see that happening right across the street. Recently, because I go to Mom and Pop's about now once every 2 weeks, and look at the litter and debris that's been deposited around the area. Their staff marks every shooter that is sold, and they don't have any that are less than $1.70. And the last time I was there were a dozen shooters that were outside of even their area on Bering Street, and none of them were marked. And the most likely location they came from, because they were brands that were all carried, and not all the brands were carried by mom and pops, but all of them were carried by In-N-Out. So we're trying to figure out, is there a way to do this? There was a discussion about an overlay district. Using the zoning standards of an overlay district, the municipality may want to look at that. That's primarily for structure type and use. It seems to me that the better option is to go with a boundary that's established, and it's done in the alcohol establishment or conditional use standards, so that within a specific area there are specific standards associated with alcohol sales, packaged liquor sales, or conditional use standards which you review that can be applied specifically. So those become part of the rules of doing anything with a specific boundary. Similar to downtown, but more specifically to the alcohol sales and conditional use standards associated with those. We've been talking to Spenard Community Council, and they share similar problems and want to participate in the solution for the area. We have not talked to North Star yet to look at that. But it seems to me that the biggest problem in the Midtown area is the concentration and then the sale price of what the products are. So that's, I think, the best way to attack it.
Thank you. Forrest?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. We're not going to be able to finish this in 10 minutes. There's so much here, but I did want to point out that, Chris is gone. Tim just made a strong Pigouvian argument regarding the alcohol tax and price elasticity amongst very heavy drinkers at the very low end, which is their argument, which is for most drinkers it's inelastic, but for underage drinkers and for very heavy drinkers, even a small increase in price can actually lead to lower consumption. So just wanted to do a shout out for an 19th century English economist.
Well, I did want to note that it's interesting that in the marijuana portion of the code, there is a requirement to meet with the community council. Now, that's not a standard that's associated with liquor sales. There's no MOU that's associated with it that's there. What we'd really like to see is that the proprietors of businesses recognize that price is relevant. They consider that their actions can and do impact the adjacent areas. There are safety concerns. Everybody needs to get past the issue of once the person leaves my door, it's not my problem. Because a big part of the problem is that there are straw buyers in every part of town. And when Chris Constant and I took on the Fairview problem, the video was so telling, and part of why we wanted Eddie at Mom and Pop's to put cameras up is that the straw buyers were congregating in behind and to the side of the mall, and then sending one or two people in to buy, and then they come back out and distribute it. Similar problem with the one that was in Fairview. And it's a serious, serious problem. So there may have to be some legal modifications as far as regulations that if you're a straw buyer, an adult is not supposed to be buying for minors, but a straw buyer should not be buying for other parties as well, and there should be a penalty associated with that. So this is a bigger problem, and one thing that I learned working on the Carlick Manor, the first Housing First project, is that there's a weird association, not just drinking during the day, but there's a highlighted time of drinking, especially during the winter, so that you can have a high enough blood alcohol level when you brack that you get hauled down to the sleep-off center so you have a nice warm place to stay. So there's binge drinking at the end of the day when the temperatures are dropping, probably the most dangerous time for an inebriate, so that they can actually be drunk enough to get someplace warm to stay. So
Let me take that.
Tim, I would argue that we need to add Campbell Park into it because there is a gentleman that works intersection with Pure Otis 7 days a week, 30 hours a day.
Yep.
Even though it's only 24. He's there like a stop sign,
no,
donating, getting money, and then he goes down to the liquor store and buys his booze. And the next day he's back there.
well, there should also be a restriction.
But what we've seen is
against-
Midtown is sloughing off into Campbell Park.
It
We've
is.
got a lot of liquor stores right along here, right across from the rescue mission.
Yep.
Which is not a good situation because they do brack testing there at the rescue mission.
So it's a very serious problem. It's a safety problem. One other consideration is that it ought to be illegal to, I guess, bag, if you want to call it that, from the median. It may already be.
It already is on
but
the
it
safety
needs to
corridor,
be
but I can't get
enforced.
chief of police to enforce it. I've tried numerous times.
Yeah, so a couple of things in there. You know, I see in the map in this area, a couple of operators that do really good jobs. And I would like to ensure that any restrictions that come out of any regional process are fair to those who are operating good businesses and not unfair to them, that we constrain or force them to be unable to sell specialty products, you know, that come in a package the size that we're banning because a lot of junk products come in it. And then, Tim, I 100% agree, and it's been my long-held hope that the neighborhood responsibility plan process implemented through the cannabis laws gets generalized to the alcohol industry, because it is and ironically, the model for the neighborhood responsibility plan started with the effort to close the Spirits of Alaska.
Right.
And so that was where we did it first, and it's where it worked best. And it really did bring the Oak and Keg up there at the corner of 13th and Gamble.
So I think some things just need to be, clarified, confirmed, and make standards so that when an applicant or licensee comes in for renewal or a new one, that you're actually taking into consideration, because they're not all the same. There's great operators out there. There's some that maybe aren't so great and believe that their responsibility is less than it probably should be, in my opinion, from a community standpoint. The reality is it's a conditional use, and the absolute bar is that you have to be able to show that you can be made compatible with the surrounding community. And many of the operations in this concentration aren't coming across that way. Now, Fred Meyer, Oak and Keg, Brown Jug, some of their sales are below the $1.70, but maybe on a sale day, but they have much different security measures that they take, and because of the way that the operation is, they can oversee that a little bit better. So one of the tests for the assembly when these conditional use or special use permits come in is that you should be looking at security measures. How do you prevent straw buyers? How do you do that? If you're a small operation in the middle of a mall, which some of them are, there should be some type of showing that you've got cameras around so you can prevent that. If it's a Fred Meyer, where you have to go into the store, they've got security people right there, and in the liquor component, it's lesser of a problem. But we have a serious problem, and I've always believed that the alcohol problem in town is much worse than anything associated with marijuana.
Yeah, I agree with that last statement. There are a few issues here, and again, we're not going to be able to finish this today. But when we were working with mom and pops, they do have sort of a fairly strong, almost equal protection argument. It's not literally the constitutional equal protection argument, but it's similar. That why are you doing this to us and not to others? On the other hand, I do worry about how we're going to operationalize this. First of all, what you just said, there are good operators already for whom these restrictions don't make a lot of, some of these restrictions might not make a lot of sense. I mean, even in Midtown Community Council, you have La Bodega, which is just vastly different than the liquor stores that you're talking about. The other major problem I see is how we define geographic areas in a way that makes sense. I mean, just looking at this map here, the real issue is probably along Spenard Road, or no, which road is that? That's the 36th, right? So, or maybe International. Anyway, there's this string of liquor stores along here that have a lot more in common with each other than, again, La Bodega, which is a high-end, mostly beer, and is also in the
And on
Midtown
La
Community
Bodega,
Council.
at one point we said absolutely there should be no sale of shooters. My wife got mad at me and said, I don't want to have to buy a fifth to cook with. I said, okay, I get it.
Right.
But there seems to be a baseline relevant price. I don't like having a price tag in the consideration, because as the cost of living goes up and everything else, that's going to be a low number that have to be adjusted, and somebody's going to have to remind the assembly.
Well, it also seems
why it
discriminatory
needs to go up.
against people who aren't wealthy, and I mean, again, this is like a pretty big conversation, and we only for
Well, let's,
10
so
minutes.
we have mere moments, Francis.
So the area-based restrictions is problematic, because I think that Tim illustrated that you have two liquor stores right across from one another, and it's unfair that certain restrictions apply to one but not the other. But in order to address that, creating a area-based restriction thing is going to inevitably be unfair between regions, either across town, or you could still have one region or area that these restrictions apply to, and then have a liquor store across the street that's not within that. So I think that his attempt, or I'm sorry, the attempt to be fair to these two operators is creating, is not fixing the fairness issue. What you could do is, with that individual operator that's across the street, deal with them in a similar manner if they're having, these inequity.
I think we have no option at this time but to have
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, I have to interject, even though Francis closed the door. There is another meeting scheduled to start right now in this room. So, and this is a very important and hefty topic I'd recommend.
If there's an overconcentration of alcohol in an area, you can deny the conditional use permit or the special land use permit for alcohol.
Okay, Dick?
Tim, also take a look at Northern Lights, where the Fred Meyer is. It's right across the street, cars is going in. I'm sure they're going to liquor store there. So we've got people that are passed out drunk there on Northern Lights, and now they can stagger across the highway, not maybe get hit or not, and then buy liquor there. It's just, we've got to deal with this problem because it's an area-wide problem.
Well, you can not grant them the conditional use. That'll be
I know,
before you
if
in
I'm
2
still on the
months.
assembly, believe me, I will.
Be in 2 months.
So we do,
But I won't be.
I guess a couple ways go, sit on this and deal with it another day, or, but Felix senses there's some, my understanding, you've got in and out liquor, you have in and out liquor in front of us.
Right.
Do you want this in play at the same time? I mean, this could be introduced.
Quite frankly, I don't know that there's enough time to get this type of thing and an area-wide thing structured, but I do believe that from a Midtown Community Council standpoint, that we're going to be asking the Assembly to impose equal restrictions on the in and out liquor license.
Which is fair. Tony, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Potter and Mr. Constance's suggestions. I think we need to move forward with in and out, and then the other process will take longer.
I also want to in and out in Eggers.
Let's come back.
What's that?
Different 9 minutes.
Yeah.